Hey, everybody, welcome back to the Building Great Experiences podcast. I'm Drew, and with me today, I've got my friends and fellow futurist, Nande Silva. Nande is a good buddy of mine, and we've worked together a couple of places before. But why I'm having on the show is we've spent a lot of time the last, especially a few months, but over the last probably couple of years, just talking about where work is going with AI and all the new technology that's coming into existence. So, anyways, Nande, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Thanks for having me. So my name is Hernande Silva. I go by Nande for short. I feel like I'm a human-centered futurist. I guess that's the best way to describe me. I've been doing ways of working and product transformation and digital transformations for a really long time, probably for about 20 years, mostly here in Charlotte, but across much of the region. And so I've had some opportunities to work with really large organizations, but also really small ones and some startups. Getting them to kind of their next level and through transforming the ways that they're working, transforming the ways that they focus on their customers and how they provide their services more effectively or in a better, more human-centered way, I guess. So, been doing that for quite some time.
Awesome, man. Well, thanks for being on the show. Excited to have you here. So today we're really going to be talking about, like I said, the future of work with all the new technology coming out. And we're going to be looking more on like a 3+ year horizon. So, like future. And so I'd love to start just by you sharing a little bit about how you think around the future of work, right? What's coming in the years ahead? What kinds of ideas and approaches are going to be valued? And just, generally, how is that going to affect the customer and employee experience?
Yeah, absolutely. I think everything's going to change. I think a lot of us underestimate how much is actually going to change. I think most organizations will have to go through some level of change. We'll have to go through some level of how do we adapt, how do we adopt AI and adapt to AI, and how do we take some of these great AI augmentations or these strengths or these additional abilities and capabilities, and how do we incorporate them into our everyday and get the most out of that, right? And I think a lot of folks are challenged with how to do exactly that. Like, there's a lot of risk, there's a lot of security concerns, there's a lot of all these challenges that are keeping them from even, to be honest, even just looking into what it's going to take to get started, or maybe they've gotten started into some pockets of their organization and they just don't know how to now take their learnings and take their experiments and what they've learned from those and incorporate them into the rest of the organization. So I feel like a lot's going to change in a very short period of time. I will say, I think a lot is already changing, but we're going to actually experience it and feel it in one fell swoop versus just kind of gradually experiencing it and feeling it like we have in past, technology booms, right? I think this is going to be a lot of capability, a lot of intelligence, a lot of labor essentially being replaced by artificial intelligence in a very short period of time. So I think there's a lot of folks individually ready for that, but as large organizations or even small organizations, as a set of humans working together, I don't think there's a lot of us that are kind of ready for that level of change.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think I was talking to my wife probably a week or two ago, and right now it feels like, remember that era when Amazon was like still relatively new, and you would go to the store and you'd be at the checkout lane, and while you're standing there, be like, I bet I could have bought this on Amazon,
Yeah,
right?
yeah, yeah,
Like it feels like right now we're kind of in that mode where people are starting to realize like, oh, I could have probably used AI for this, right? But they're
right.
not
Yeah,
quite using it. And I think to your point, with everything going to change, I mean, when Amazon became what it is now, like everything changed, right? E-commerce changed, retail changed, like how we think about getting goods to our houses, and like even like instead of having to go, every week and buy all your toiletry items and your household items, you could just have a subscription box show up at your doorstep
100%.
every, 30 days or whatever.
Well,
And so I think AI is in a similar way, probably to an even greater extent, going to disrupt and transform just how we think, how we work. Like instead of it being, this, I have to go and I got to fill out these notes and I got to do this thing and I got to put
yeah,
this here and I got to go over there. It's like we're gonna start thinking in terms of like agents. I think in the shorter future, like you're gonna have like you're familiar with like agentic framework, right? So you're gonna have like
Yep.
this AI
Yep.
agent's gonna do all of this for me, and then this agent they're gonna do all this, and then you're gonna have like this almost like team of AI agents that are doing different things for you, and they're all running 24/7,
100%.
and you're going to be able to focus on the more strategic,
Yeah.
sort of softer side of things,
Yeah.
right? Which
100%.
is probably going to be uncomfortable for people, right?
Absolutely. It's like they don't have to operate in a 9 to 5. So you mentioned a couple of things I want to go back to. So for some, that change from Amazon to like going to a big box store and then, going to Amazon, for some retailers, that change happened overnight for them, right? Even though this was happening around them, it was almost this, well, it's not going to impact me because I sell this very niche thing or this very specific thing. And so there's no impact. And then all of a sudden they had to close down shop, unfortunately, because a lot of their products that they were selling were cheaper, on Amazon, right? And could be ordered on Amazon. So I think for some, that was an overnight change. And I think for many, this time around with this type of change, it will feel like an overnight or like a next day change. Like all of a sudden, this is now a challenge or a problem for me. So there's that. The other side of it too is I think the dynamic of teams and what a team actually means in the future is going to be very, very different. I think a lot of organizations are challenged right now, even with understanding team dynamics, what makes highly effective teams operate really well. And I think, and the psychology around that and that psychological safety around that and the ability to kind of be innovative and experiment. And so that's a challenge right now in organizations. And it will be in many ways, it will be a lot better and a lot easier with AI and having, again, team members that are agents, right? Because a lot of that baggage, right, of experimentation and fear of experimentation won't necessarily be there because I can back out of that experiment a lot faster. It's not millions of dollars wasted on an experiment as an example. So there's that, right? But there's also a bit of the unknown, a massive unknown of, how do I operate with AI team members? What does that look like? What does that mean? How do I gain from how I change the way I'm operating currently with humans? How does that need to be modified to be human and AI or even robots, right? Like, how does that work? How does that look, in the near future? And I think there's going to be a psychological change that most people will have to go through. And to kind of understand how to get the most out of my new working environment or partnership or team member environment. And yeah, I think it's going to be really interesting. That's the kind of stuff that I geek out about with, the psychology of teams, and how they interact and how people interact and how, on good days it looks like this and on bad days it looks like that, and what that could possibly look like, and what changing some expectations with one another could actually do to improve the situation, human to human. I'm sure there's going to be much of that that's going to carry over into human AI, and who knows, maybe even AI. I have no idea. I'm still trying to figure that out. I'm doing a lot of reading on that. So it's I think what we can count on for sure is that there's going to be a lot of change that our brains will have to adapt to, right? Our brains and our emotions will have to adapt to. And I think that's going to be difficult in many ways, right? It's going to be amazing and innovative and liberating in many ways, right? Because to your point, we won't be working on these minutia things. Now we can do big ideas and float that to an AI and see what else, how much better it can make that idea. Or how much better we can make an idea it came up with, as an example, right? So I think it's going to be liberating in those senses, but I think it's also going to be very difficult because for some or for many, we've been in control, in many ways. Taking an idea or taking something and giving it to an agent, right, and letting it spin on it for 24 hours, and it comes back with an already produced product or an already pretty substantial product, that might feel minimizing as a human, right? Like you might feel lesser than in certain ways, right? And so I think we're going to have to figure out how to kind of navigate that emotional space, if that makes sense.
Yeah. I think my the more I've pondered this, the more I think that the world will start to look a lot like you're either a super generalist or you're a super specialist. And
Yeah,
there's not going to be really much in between. Because you think about
yeah,
if you're like, let's say if you're better than the robots, right? Like you're really deep knowledge in something that like, and it's super nuanced, and
yeah,
AI is never going to be able to have that because it's like it's a different, it's just it's not capable of doing it. Those people are going to be like, it's like the artisans of old, right? Like it's like you're going to have these artisans that are like, they're going to continue to be able to have a job and do the thing, whatever.
100%.
And then you're going to have the people who are like, they are so wide that they can span across a bunch of different stuff and be able to like connect all of the dots
Yeah,
to deliver value
yeah,
in the world. And then I think the people that are going to really struggle are the ones who are like, they're neither. They're kind of like, I'm okay at a couple things,
yeah,
and it's like, those are the ones where you're like, dude, get really really good at something, or get really really good at like a lot of things.
yeah, yeah. I think
you
so.
know
Yeah, I think you're onto something. That's a really good point. I think there's a side of this that's the I just want to mention a nuance here, which is the better than the AI, right? Like if we continue moving in the trajectory, where I'm going to go deep for just a minute,
yeah
as we continue to move into a trajectory into general intelligence or even super intelligence, right? That side of being better than is not really an option, right? Like it will still be better than most of us at everything, right? Like that's the potential, right? So for me, I actually see it more as a what other humans value more, right? So it's kind of one of those things where I'm really good at this thing that other humans like myself prefer to get it from human interaction or from a human made source, right? And I think there's going to be a slew of those things. And that doesn't necessarily mean that I can't augment that with AI or do parts of that with AI as long as the outcome is the value and that's specific, right? I still think that's possible and plausible, right? But I think it's more that. I think it's going to be more as a human, I value this specific thing from another human's hands or brain or heart. And so I prefer that over, no matter how realistic and how intelligent the robot or the AI, the artificial intelligence is, I still prefer that from the human imperfection, right? Like that human thing that we can't really put a finger on, right? I think it's that, right? I think it's more that. And but I think you're also right. You're very right on the generalist side. I think there's going to be more of I always make the statement that I'm very knowledgeable. I'm sorry. I know a little bit of a lot of things, right? And then there's a few things that I know a lot about, right? And I think that's going to be more and more valuable. Like I just feel like that because that's who we are. Like we are ultimately outside of work. We're kind of like that. There's a lot of us that are just, I know a lot of things. I'm sorry, I know a little bit about a lot of things, right? And then there's these very specific things that I really enjoy, that I'm really obsessed with, that I can go really deep on and talk about it forever, right? And so I think that's the some of the liberty or some of the the liberties or some of the freedom that I think we're going to get is to kind of bring some of who we are outside of work into work more, because we don't have to play this very specific niche role. The AI can pick up some of these pieces, and now we can be a little bit more of what makes us human and complex, right? So sorry,
yeah
sorry to go deep, but yeah.
no I think so two things I'll hit on from what you just said. I think I wrote about this on LinkedIn recently. It was this
Yeah.
concept of soul. And
Mm,
like, I think, to kind of what you're saying, as things continue to get gobbled up by AI and everything becomes the sea of same, it's like the sea of sameness,
yeah,
we humans will we will place a higher value on man or human made things. And it's because of that, the human quality, right? The soul characteristic of it, where it's like somebody spent time making this thing, their
Mhm.
most valuable asset, and there was craft and care, love put into it, and we will pay more for that. And I think so. So I think on the specialist side, 100%, I think that humanity piece of it is important. And then I think there's this guy that I follow who's really solid, the kind of like startup mind. His name's Greg Eisenberg. He has this podcast called the Startup Ideas Podcast. Really interesting. But anyway, he talks a lot about this idea of that, like, we will pretty soon see the first $1 billion solopreneur startup, and you'll basically have a person who has a team of AI agents who is able to like connect all of these dots at a level, that's been unprecedented before, and be able to build and scale a company, and it'll just be one person, one human doing all of this stuff, and they'll be able to connect all of these pieces and do it at a high level that they can compete with like enterprises, right? Or
100%.
unicorns.
Yeah. That
So
actually takes me to an area or a topic I want to talk about. But yeah, I just have a little twist on that, which is I think you're right, and I think he's right that it's very possible to have a million or $1 billion one person organization, right? I think as this evolves to the next layer or level of intelligence, it's going to be a lot easier to do that. But I like the idea of maybe a smaller organization being scaled by AI, right? Like the idea of like the one person, almost takes me to a bit of the Lord of the Rings, like one ring to rule them all, right? It's a little bit of that. Like it's great. I feel like it would be great to have. I feel like what's probably going to endure more, or what's going to be more successful, is maybe a 2, 3, 5, 10 person company, right? Because now you've got these, again, that heart and mind side of it interacting with other hearts and minds versus just kind of interacting with machines, right? So not that, it can't imitate or possibly imitate consciousness in some level of soul. Maybe it can, who knows? That's a bigger later conversation. But, I feel like, again, like 2, 3, 4, 5, 10 humans being able to kind of interact and share ideas and share their experiences and their passion, but also even their stories, right? And what's made them who they are. I think all of those things are going to give the organizations of the future, in my mind, an actual soul, right? To be honest, right? It's kind of, I think as we've like looked at very, very large organizations, we've kind of lost the soul and the purpose of what we're trying to do and what we're accomplishing, right? So I think, that's part of the equation. I think that it's part of, a bit of the goal. And I think, I think the organization of the future is going to be hyper focused on real value, on like a bit more of that intrinsic value of like, okay, great, you're providing me this service or this product, but do you really resonate and connect with me and understand the difficulties that I'm having on a day to day, or the wins that I'm having on a day to day, depending on what your product's helping me with. Maybe it's helping me with my wins. Maybe it's helping me with my with my challenge or whatever it is, right? And I think we're getting to not at a creepy level, knowing too much about me, but at a level where it's like, okay, now you understand my needs and I understand your product. So this is a good customer service provider relationship to have. And I think I think that's the, the very new near future, in my opinion. Uh, Maybe for some organizations faster than others, but still, like, I feel like that's the case. And you mentioned something really interesting, which is the smaller organizations running circles around larger organizations, right? Like, I feel like with AI, it is the ultimate, a bit of the ultimate equalizer, right? For organizations to kind of go, hey, you had an army of people doing this. Now we too have the equivalent of that. And because we're only 5, 10, 20, 30 people, we have such a concrete level and layer of alignment, and our incentive structure is structured in such a way that we're really able to align at that, finishing one another's thoughts level, right? I think we're going to see some magical products and companies come out of this. Maybe I'm wrong, but I feel like that's yeah, we're going to
I
see some,
agree.
yeah.
No, I agree. I mean, that was like the thesis behind me quitting and starting StealthX, was like,
Yeah,
I saw
yeah,
the future coming, and I was like, I want to be on the front of this tidal wave.
totally.
I'm going to I'm going to quit and catch the wave on the way,
Love it.
on the way up versus on the way and like have it crash on me,
Yeah.
the quote, the thing I like to say is like, a team of 5 can hit harder than a team of 55. Right. And I firmly believe that. And I've already, been seeing that where you can accomplish a whole lot if you have a team of sort of high level super soldiers
Yep.
who have I use this you've heard of like the T model
Mm-hmm.
in talent development. So historically there's this, for those who don't know, the T model is where you're like, someone's like deep in one thing and then kind of wide in a lot of things.
Yep. Broad.
I actually believe that it's more of like a comb, and if you have like let's our broken comb maybe,
Yeah.
but if
Yeah.
you have like the teeth of the comb, they go together, they fill kind of all the gaps, and so you end up having this really well-rounded unit of people that's only 4 or 5 people. And that seal metaphor, I think, is going to be, I really think that that's what's going to start to happen, is you're going to start to see these pockets of smaller companies, seals of like 5 to 10 people that are like taking on the Goliaths of their industry and knocking them out. Like you're going to have a whole lot of like, I grew up in the Philippines, so Manny Pacquiao,
Yeah.
right? Manny
Yeah.
Pacquiao is going to be like
Love
this little southpaw, just like
Yes.
hitting people in the jaw. And people are like, "Whoa, what is happening?" I think that's going to start to be more and more common. And I also think I've been seeing this a lot. I'm curious if you're seeing the same. There's a lot of contractors, freelancers, fractional people who are starting to form this like fabric or this network where you've got like, I mean, today I met with several different folks who they're like a company of one, right? They provide fractional services or consulting services of some kind or the other. And there's this network that's being created where instead of having like typical full-time employees that are salaried and da 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 da, like you have this, like you pick up the phone and you call the best of the best, and they're like a fractional person, or they're like in a kind of consulting type role, and you're able to assemble a team of Avengers
Yep. Yep.
from the best of the best. And it's like, they're not full-time employees. They don't want to be full-time employees. They're using these like augments, i.e., meaning AI, where it's like they've got their, like, to continue the Avengers metaphor, they've got their like shield and
Yep.
their Black Panther claws, and they've got their Thor hammer and stuff. You're gonna see them doing way more damage than this, like the classic army, like trudging through the snow or the
100%.
mud or whatever.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Yeah, I have seen that too. And so like I want to say it was about 4 years ago, maybe 5 years ago, before a lot of this AI stuff really hit that acceleration, right? Or that explosion, right? That first explosion. We had like some mini explosions, right? But like it was when GPT came out, that first round, it was like, whoa, like this is going to change everything, right? But, I think a little bit before that, I was mentioning things around like the gig economy, and just how I felt the gig economy was going to accelerate, and there was going to be like more organizations, because there was such a drought or a talent challenge, right? More and more organizations were going to put out a lot more of these opportunities, these jobs, to kind of be, again, like these like 1-2 contractor, one-off, few hours here, a few hours there, get this thing done, more outcome based versus hour based, and kind of, bring in more contractors, more consultants to kind of get the job done in this kind of this quick, let's turn this around, let's make this happen, let's use this SEAL team, right, to get the job done, right? And of course, the challenge with that, of course, is that organizations kind of go, well, that means I don't have, a lot of that expertise in house, because it's out here, and, and then where, they're when they leave, they take all of the knowledge with them. Right? And I think back then, right, 5 years ago, I think it's part of the reason why it didn't pick up. I think there's many reasons why it didn't pick up. I think there's other like security concerns and this and that and the other, whatever, right? All that stuff. But I think it didn't pick up because it was this idea of, I have to grow my talent in-house. And I have to retain my talent because there's a labor shortage, there's a talent shortage, right? And I think that's exactly where we're headed. I think we're going to continue to your point, AI is going to augment these very strong, very capable individuals that are either generalists or very specific area focused, and organizations or smaller organizations, even big ones, right, can bring them in and go, hey, we're gonna keep you on to kind of help us through this tough challenge or these things or these ideas, or whatever they are, and the AI is going to do the rest. And all of this other minutia stuff is going to go get done over here, and we're going to bring AI into these ideation sessions, and we're going to come up with these out of the box concepts and ideas, and then we're going to have a small team see it to fruition and get done. I used to be a hyper product focused person, right? And I used to coach and train and mentor teams into being better product teams. And I think we're going to see an upswing in this more project based work. Like, hey, let's get this thing off the ground, and less product based work. I think it's probably going to be a merge of the two, of like product project. But I think we're going to get a lot more comfortable in going, hey, in this period of time, this short period of time, we're going to run these experiments, gain a lot from it. And then either A, we're going to build a product off of it, or an offering or a service off of it, or B, we're just going to keep cycling new projects to see which one we like the most, / in a very short period of time.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that innovation window, or those innovation sprint concepts and those design sprint concepts, I think those are going to get a lot easier to run with AI team members than they are with human team members. Don't get me wrong, there'll still be plenty of human team members in the mix, because we have to keep humans in the loop, but for many reasons. But I really do. I think we're going to see a lot more of that. I think we're going to see a lot more of these, like, hey, I'm a freelance specialist that knows these areas really well, and a lot of these other areas good enough, and I think what we're actually going to value more is their ability to think outside the box, and their ability to kind of use their brain power, not their, hey, hold on, let me fill out this spreadsheet. Right.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's very different for a lot of organizations. I think that's very different than the way they've been operating for the last 20 years. For some really great to good organizations, they've been making that shift or already lived there, right? So I think that's going to be, interesting. It's going to be great. I think it's going to be great. I personally love the idea. Of course, I'm saying it's going to be great, but I think it's going to be hard for some folks. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So let's talk a little bit. Let's change gears into, like, who's doing this well. Like, what are some of the companies or early adopters that you see setting the tone for the future of work?
Yeah, I think that's a really good question. I think a lot of folks are getting, I'm sorry, I think some folks are getting pieces of this right. Even like a good example of this is even like Klarna, which I think is I don't know if they're Swedish.
A financing
fintech
company.
type organization. So Klarna did this thing where they stopped backfilling positions. So they allowed the natural attrition of an organization to just happen, or their organization to just happen. Instead of backfilling for the positions of people that naturally left their organization, because the idea here is that every, 2 to 5 years, somebody leaves an organization. In my opinion, in certain industries, it's a lot less than that. But nonetheless, 2 to 5 is what they were experiencing. That was their average. So Klarna isn't backfilling those roles, and instead they're using AI to backfill those roles or parts of those roles, right? And I think that's great. I think and basically also what they're doing is they're taking the benefits of that, the savings, the financial savings of that, and they're putting it back into their workforce, into the people that stuck around, into the people that have ownership, that kind of thing of the organization, right? Which is great. I feel like that's a great model. I think the challenge there, however, is the incentive system. And as that continues, and actually as that continues to perpetuate, and more people leave and select few stay, because again, they went from 4,500 to 3,500, I think, in 2 years, right? So as that continues to happen, I think if people are incentivized to increase people leaving, right? And they associate the incentive of, if I get more people to leave, I now get more money in my pocket, right? That can create some really bad, ways of thinking, right? And that can create some really bad practices, right? And so I think there's that missing piece, right? Like, I don't know. I don't really know for a fact if they went that deep into their strategy, but I think that's the type of thinking that organizations need to have, right? Like, okay, we're doing this now. What does that mean 3 years from now when we've lost another X% of our people? And now we've backfilled them with AI. What kind of anti-patterns, bad patterns are we actually creating because we didn't change our incentive model, or we didn't change the goals of the company to reflect where we're headed and what we're trying to do and what we're gaining from using AI, right? So I think there's a little bit of, I think again, it's like, this is new territory for so many, right? That there's going to be a lot of people that that aren't thinking that far ahead. And then even though they've made some of the right steps left of the timeline, right? As they get into the right, they realize, oh crap, like we didn't think about that, right? And that's going to happen across the board with any strategy. But I think there's some missed opportunity there, in my opinion. So yeah,
Yep.
yeah,
So two come to mind for me.
yeah,
I love the Klarna example, and I think it's
yeah.
a really important one. So I mentioned already Greg Eisenberg.
Mhm.
He's like one of those content creators that has put a lot of, he's like built and sold a couple startups. And so anyway, I think there's a lot of information out there just around like solopreneurs. And one example that I've been thinking about is Levels.io. He's kind of a single solopreneur. He has built like 7 companies, I think, using AI, and they're all generating, 50 to 150 million or 1,000 in sales per month. And like one of them is like Photo AI, I think it is. And then, yeah, it's like photoai.com. And the other one is interiorAI.com. But anyway, like, I think that it's like, it's this one guy, Peter, I think is his name, and he's using AI agents to create these companies. Like he comes up with an idea, rapidly gets something in the market, proves product market fit, scales it, and is generating revenue from it. So I think that that's like, an example of some folks who are doing it well. In our final couple minutes, I wanted to see if you can give like, what are 3 quick tactical things that people can do right
Oh,
now
that's
to
good.
prepare for the future?
Yeah. Yeah, that's really good. I think one thing is having like, so again, bringing people together to have the conversations about how we can use and leverage AI, right? So there's a lot of organizations that have had that conversation, but don't know how to move it forward. And then there's a lot of organizations, I think there's more organizations that have kind of had a leadership meeting about it. And that's as far as they've gotten. And even then, they haven't really dissected what are the different opportunities, what are the different risk areas, what's our risk appetite towards this, where could we, potentially start soon or even tomorrow. Right. And I think that's really important. I feel like that's a big miss, right? Like as many workshops that happen, as many organizations that bring in consulting firms and have these opportunities to kind of have these strategic, especially at the end of the year, which I don't even want to get into the how often should you have strategy sessions? Once a year is not it, right? Like you should definitely not have it just once a year at the end of the year, but nonetheless, right? So at the end of the year, beginning of next year. And I think there's just so much change on the horizon that, I think the first step is like start having those conversations. In my opinion, there's a spectrum or of where people fall right on their fear of AI or their acceptance, whatever it may be. Right? And I think for you to bring in to that meeting and to those sessions, the folks that are on both sides of that spectrum, both like all the way to the extremes, right? I think are really important because what that winds up doing for you as a leader is kind of understanding where the extremes of your organization are as it relates to AI and as it relates to risk, um, and security overall, right? Like what that appetite looks like. That allows you to kind of understand that as a leader. And then it also allows you to kind of start to bridge that gap. And maybe, who knows, like maybe you might wind up with a lot closer of a spectrum than you think, or a lot, yeah. So in my mind, it's that like start having those conversations and then, start taking that high level conversation and start breaking it down into where are the areas that we're willing to go and experiment and what could those experiments look like? And what are the gaps that we have that we're concerned about that we should look at partners and providers to come in and answer about our concerns versus just ignoring them and going, oh, we're not ready yet. It's too insecure. It's too much, right? Of like actually have those conversations, bring those people in, because I think that's where a lot of leadership is going. A lot of leadership, in the new, like, because we didn't talk about that, but with the changes in labor, I think leadership is also going to get affected by that. And there's a lot more brain power versus management. There's a lot more leadership and thought leadership that's going to be needed and required from leaders versus just kind of, managing the stacks, right? So, I think that's it. I think that's number one. And number two, I think it's the understand how much this is going to have a psychological impact to your workforce and to yourself, right? So if you're a leader in an organization, this is going to impact you psychologically. And there's going to be many difficult scenarios that many other CEOs, CIOs have never encountered or dealt with in the past. Like, even if you've gone through digital transformations, product transformations, ways of working, like those types of transformations, this thing is moving so fast, and you're going to have to make some critical decisions a lot faster and with a lot more data points that a lot to dissect or digest, that it's going to have an impact. It's going to have an impact on you, at an emotional level. So I think, like, you need to understand that for yourself, and you need to understand that for everyone else around you and your workforce. I think that's definitely number two. I think number three is understand that I believe most of your organization is experimenting with AI at a personal, individual level. And they're not necessarily applying their learnings because they can't, because maybe you haven't implemented in your organization, to make them more efficient and more effective in their workplace, in their work as part of the workforce. I think that's a gap. I think that's a challenge for most leaders. Now, I think they maybe think, their workforce isn't using AI as often as they actually are for their own personal use. And I think that's clearly becoming more and more, that's growing more and more, that's increasing more and more. And, and I think they don't quite understand that. But again, even though your workforce is learning how to use AI because they're using it personally on a day-to-day, you're not seeing the benefits of that most of the time in your organization. And it's slowing your organization down, and it's really it's going to be detrimental to your organization in some form or fashion in the near, 2 to 3 years, if not next year for sure. Right. So, so I hope that,
That's good.
Yeah,
man.
cool.
Well, I super appreciate you being on the show.
Yeah.
Where can folks find you online?
They can find me on LinkedIn. That's probably the easiest way to find me. So I'm there. I'm under Hernande Silva, actually. So that's Hernande Silva, Silva, not under Nande, which is what I go by. It's Hernande. So yep. That's where they can find me.
Awesome, man.
Yeah.
And folks, you can find me online, pretty much every social platform, Drew H. Burdick, also drewburdick.com. P.S. Just recently launched the AI North Star Playbook online, which talks a lot about some of the things that Nande was mentioning there at the end, having a clear vision and kind of solving the right problem with AI, not just solving any problem. So if you're curious, take a look. Go to playbook.stealthx.co. You also have the link in the description. Nande, thanks for being on the show, man. I appreciate
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it, as always.
Hey there. I hope you enjoyed this episode. If you could take a second, hit the subscribe button below. It would really mean the world. I'm trying to make some great content for you every week by interviewing folks and hearing what they have to say about building great experiences. I try to share tips and tricks and things like that. Anyways, take a second, hit that like and subscribe, and I'll see you soon. Thanks, guys.